We now have a little bit more from the leaked document, because BuzzFeed have released a line on what it says about the estimated effect of reducing EU immigration. Alberto Nardelli, as BuzzFeed's Europe editor, is with us. He was the man who received the leaked document. Alberto, so what is the line on immigration?
Well, I think the point on immigration in the analysis is that it shines a light on one of the other conundrums that this government is currently facing. Basically, it shows that under different potential policy scenarios, on the one hand, the number of people from the European Union arriving in the UK would be reduced by about 40 to 90,000 people a year. However, this produces a hit on the economy, and the trouble that the government has, that the upsides of Brexit, so for example this trade deal with the United States, the value to GDP that this would provide is far smaller than that hit, and this is the issue which cuts across throughout this document.
So we knew that the general economic effect was negative, but specifically the benefit of going off and saying to the US, we can now trade to you because we're not in the customs union and the single market, is offset by the fact that your immigration control is that you now have the freedom to apply, to oppose. That's going to wipe out the benefits of, more than wipe out the benefits of the...
Absolutely, and I think that's the issue. So if you look at this document, there is no scenario in which non-tariff barriers, even if the UK were to stay in the single market through the European Economic Area, it would be able to mitigate some of those losses, but there is no scenario in which all of those losses would be eliminated. And that's the problem, because this document doesn't aim to refight the referendum. What it does is says, Britain's leaving the European Union, these are the upsides, these are the downsides, this is what they look like in terms of impact on the economy. Now ministers decide what you would like to do. But look,
in all the things you've said and published out of it, and you haven't published it all because you have to protect your sources and need to worry about whether certain things would identify any source. Of all of them, the upside effect of a trade deal with the US is estimated at approximately zero, isn't it? I mean,
0.2%.
But that's how much bigger our economy is in 15 years' time.
Absolutely.
0.2% bigger, which is, a bad week in the...
And the document also includes, as we mentioned in the first article that we published, that trade deals with China, Australia, New Zealand, the Gulf countries, and the ASEAN countries, the sum of those would add about 0.2 to 0.4% of GDP.
It's really very little over 15 years.
Absolutely.
Alberto, thank you very much. Well, let's talk about those implications. I'm joined by two of the biggest beasts from the Conservative jungle. Peter Bone was a founding member of the Grassroots Out campaign that wasn't affiliated to the official Leave campaign and had a stronger emphasis on the need to cut immigration. And Ken Clarke, of course, passionate Remainer, former Cabinet Minister and father of the House. Very good evening. Peter Bone, what do you make of, well, specifically the immigration stuff, that they're really finding immigration is a negative? You knew that, though, right?
Well, good evening, and the great news is we're now only 422 days away from withdrawing from this terrible European Union superstate. On the immigration thing, obviously this is Project Fear Mark II. We had Project Fear before the referendum. The British public listened to all the arguments, listened to the economic arguments, and they decided to vote to leave.
Is it your view that immigration restrictions will improve the economy or will have some cost? Because Nigel Farage says, look, I think there'll be a cost, but I'm willing to accept that.
I think on immigration, the key thing is we're going to have a fairer immigration system. We're going to have the same rules and regulations across the whole world. We are not going to discriminate in favour of the European Union. So, for instance, an unemployed person from say, Romania or somewhere could come into the country now, whereas a doctor or nurse from India has to go through all the hoops. What we're going to do is have a fairer immigration system, and of course, whichever party is in power, whichever government is in power,
they can calibrate it however they want.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ken Clarke, should we take these figures seriously? They have been quite poo-pooed by a number of Brexiteers who say, look, the forecast last time, before the referendum, the immediate forecasts weren't
I think the analyses are helpful, so as you understand what they are. And it's just absolutely silly. The present silly debate we're having on Brexit is just made sillier if everybody rejects any expert who comes up with something that doesn't happen to fit his or her side of the argument. This is the best that the civil service have been able to do, and they're very high-powered people, to make a serious, objective assessment of the impacts of the economy of the things that might change because it acknowledges the uncertainty of exactly what we're going to do to alter our economic relationships, exactly what we're going to do to immigration, and so on. And this was briefing for cabinet ministers. This is the kind of thing that, as a cabinet minister, I would expect to have from the officials, giving me their best expert, objective assessment.
But they might be subject to the groupthink that we know people do get subject to, and they may have restrictive models that, you know, build in all the effects.
Well, I might be affected by the groupthink. I mean, I think most of the economic changes vis-à-vis Europe, leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, is going to damage our economy. We're leaving one of the richest multinational free trade agreements in the world, and this is an expert attempt to say it's going to affect the economy by about this amount. Similarly, everybody's always known that if the immigrants from the EU, the young people coming here to take jobs where we need their skills, or where they're taking jobs that British people won't take for some reason in the hospitality industry, are adding to our economy.
So
the more we restrict them and cost. So this is just a perfectly fair effort to estimate what the impact might be. It's not exact, but it's the best estimate that anybody's like to be able to make. They should be published to the public, and the Cabinet should be allowed to see them without being locked in.
Let's go on that one. Peter, do you agree that everyone should be allowed to see these so they can reach their own judgment? I mean, just in a word.
First of all, there are documents that haven't been completed. They were, as Ken said, in preparation for the Cabinet, never got there. Didn't even look at what Theresa May is trying to achieve. It didn't even look at that model. And if we're going to talk about experts, well, why don't we talk about Professor Minford, who says we're going to be vastly better off.
Of course, you can pick your expert.
Exactly.
You can pick
and
your
he
expert.
has been proved more right than the Treasury. The Treasury got it totally wrong before. Was that a political thing, or did they just get it wrong?
Patrick Minford is almost the only economist I know who thinks we just open our tariffs for everybody.
But he's been more right than the Treasury. He said there would not be a disaster after the referendum. There wasn't. The Treasury said there was. That's a fact, Ken.
We're poorer since the referendum. They overestimate.
What about employment?
Let me answer you.
One last answer.
There's no doubt that large sections of the population are poorer now than they would have been if we voted Remain.
Because of the exchange rate effect.
Set off a devaluation because it damaged confidence in sterling assets. That caused inflation. The real wages of many people are not keeping up with this inflation.
We have record employment. And the lowest unemployment for 40 years.
I think what we've demonstrated...
The reason we need analysis is to stop having slogans from Brexiteers.
Right, we're going to leave it there.
All this nonsense to denounce
Thank you so much,
any attempt to analyse a very big problem for the country.
I think we've demonstrated that having a few numbers doesn't necessarily resolve the argument.
Just dismiss.
It pushes it on to the next phase. Thank you both.